Hey y'all, and welcome to the Truthfully Stewed podcast. I'm your host, Sheena Steward. And if you're not new to this, but true to this, you know me from my blog, Love at Any Stage. I decided to transition from blogging to podcasting due to my desire to have a more genuine connection with my audience. And your girl loves to talk. We will have heartfelt, unfiltered conversations about love, life, feelings, and everything in between. So, relax, because it's time to get truthful. In 2011, Hollywood did one of the things they do best. They hit us with another white savior movie. If you haven't guessed it from the title of the podcast episode, I'm talking about The Help. There are two meme-worthy scenes in this movie, Minnie's Pies and the often quoted and cringe-worthy, "You is smart, you is kind, you is important." Don't get me wrong, I'm all for positive affirmations. I recite them with the girls daily. But the visual of this scene is it's a bit much. The other day, I thought about the scene and something clicked. So, in this episode, we'll discuss my journey to motherhood of twin girls. Not one, but two. So, they is smart, they is kind, they is important. Anthony and I were married in 2016. Shortly after getting married, I decided I no longer wanted to have kids. I can't remember what prompted those feelings, but I do remember telling Anthony and witnessing him immediately become deflated. His only request was for me to no longer talk about Jude. I guess Jude was Bruno before Bruno was Bruno. I know you're like, Sheena, who the heck is Jude? Jude was our imaginary son. I was totally enamored with that name. And I'm pretty sure it was because I was totally enamored with Jude Law. Side note, Alfie was terrible. It was a terrible movie, but I used to watch it religiously. And it's sad what he did to Omar Epps. But back to the story at hand. We made peace with forever being dinks. Dual income, no kids. Sounds fancy, huh? I never thought I needed a kid to provide fulfillment to my life. And for anyone that's listening that doesn't have kids, I still feel the same way. You can have a very fulfilled life with no kids. I'm not sure what year of marriage gifted my heart with the change regarding parenthood, but one day I told Anthony I wanted to revisit the topic. And we started to talk about Jude. Late 2018, we decided we'd start trying to conceive Jude in February of 2019. I know you're thinking, why February? It was just a random month that I made up. That's it. One night in January, I said, hey, forget February. Let's do it now. I realized what I just said and no pun was intended. But my thought was, hey, it's not like it's going to happen on the first try. Child, be careful what you say out loud. Because 1 month later, on Valentine's Day to be exact, I took a pregnancy test, and just like that, Jude was on his way. Let me take a second to acknowledge I understand this isn't everyone's experience, and admittedly, I feel very guilty that it was so easy, doing air quotes, for me to get pregnant. I'm very cautious when talking to others about their pregnancy journeys or trying to get pregnant. And I try to avoid words like easy when talking to them because, again, I do acknowledge this is not everyone's experience. But after pure excitement wore off, I called my doctor's office. They asked me a few questions and they said, hey, we'll see you on March 18th. There was sheer panic on my end. I said, so y'all trust me to not mess up for a whole month. Although I have absolutely no experience with this. The lady laughed and said, yeah, we'll see you in a month, Miss Stewart. Finally, March 18th arrived and I felt like I could take myself out of bubble wrap. To give you a little backstory, Anthony had just started a new job in February. So we just didn't think it made sense for him to take off work so early and to come to that first appointment. I thought, hey, I've had the same doctor since college. He knows me. We've talked about this over the years. I can do this one on my own. But before I met with my doctor, I had to meet with the nice lady who would give me the ultrasound. And she's the one that hit me with the surprise of all surprises. Thought she was just joking, and I said, hey, is he okay? She said, yeah, they're doing fine. And I laughed and said, ha ha, you have to tell everyone that joke. But again, seriously, lady, is he okay? She pushed the monitor over and said, yes, they're doing great. My first response was, I'm so happy my husband just got a new job. And then I proceeded to text him 3 simple letters. OMG. We'll get back to the Anthony of it all later in the episode. But up next, I met with Dr. Williams. I walked in, he smiled and said, you're here. We've talked about this over the years and now you're here. He's been my gynecologist since college. He checked me out and looked over my ultrasounds and assured me everything looked great. He asked did I have any questions, and I said, yeah, I had plenty before that lady gave me the surprise of my life. I did manage to get out one very important question. I said, hey, doc, how did we get here? He gave me a look, and before he could say anything, I said, hey, I get it. The birds and the bees and all that jazz, but how did we get twins? He said, you're over 35, you're African American, and you have a family history. What I heard was, you is old, you is black, and you is destined. I was 36 when I got pregnant and also 36 when I gave birth. That means I experienced what they call a geriatric pregnancy. That term is very outdated, but I couldn't resist on saying it. But I did see the term advanced maternal age on some of my paperwork. I would laugh, but my nurse Brooke would always apologize and say she hated that phrase. Dr. Williams did break down the stats and percentages about women over 35, and he assured me that sometimes they are presented in a way that lacks nuance. He did say the likelihood of having fraternal twins increases over 35, and that's due to some women releasing more eggs. I say fraternal because there are 2 eggs. Unlike with identical, there is 1 egg that splits. And to give you even more twin knowledge, Harper and Dylan are di-di twins. That means they had their own amniotic sacs and placenta. To break it down even further, that means your girl had a lot going on in the inside. The most ironic part is my age was never a factor during my pregnancy. Dr. Williams hated those labels and felt everyone should be cared for individually, and care plans should be created for their specific journey. Despite him saying me being over 35 was one of the reasons I had twins, he never made me feel like my age was a huge factor. It was simply a bridge to the blessing of twins. Per the CDC, Black women experience maternal mortality 2 to 3 times higher than that of white women. That's heavy, so I'll let you sit with it for a second. If you're a Black woman, sadly, that stat is par for the course. We're used to fighting for our lives and rights daily. So being a Black pregnant woman is added stress and fear. After the shock of twins went away, I was prepared for my second visit with Dr. Williams. This time when he asked did I have any questions, pulled out my phone, clicked on the Notes app. The first thing I wanted to know was, why do Black women die at a higher rate than other races? He paused and said, I've never been asked that question before, but I'm happy you asked. He pulled up a chair and made deep eye contact with me. He said, simply put, it's their bias. He further explained the bias because there's no difference in our anatomy, which means the variable is the doctor's bias. He told me stories of doctors treating patients differently due to their health insurance. Women with government insurance are sometimes treated less than. Although that's disgusting, sadly, I've heard that rhetoric before. I wanted to know about women like Serena Williams. She's Serena. She has good insurance. He said in those instances, it's also the doctor's bias. They tend to not believe Black women, especially when they're experiencing pain. Their bias is literally killing Black women. After we both sat in silence for a minute, he said we could come back to that conversation at a later appointment to allow time for me to process and ask further questions. Another thing we discussed was the financial burden of having children in this country. Prior to my second appointment, he instructed me to visit the financial office to get an idea of the cost of prenatal visits and delivery. He said, as your doctor, it's also my duty to look out for you financially. He knew I worked for a healthcare corporation and could deliver at one of those facilities for free. He offered to recommend a doctor he knew because he wanted to make sure there was no financial strain during my journey. If I switched doctors, it might be free money-wise, but I might end up paying more than money to deliver. With our bias conversation still on the brain, we both knew saving a few $1,000s was not worth my peace or my life. Throughout my pregnancy journey, Dr. Williams and I continued to have deep, meaningful conversations, the type of conversations that will stick with me for the rest of my life. Leaving appointments, I would feel proud to be Black and delivering 2 Black girls into the world. I randomly, or so I thought, was scheduled an appointment with Dr. Williams. I remember walking into the room and looking around. I remember seeing 2 girls and thought, oh, he has 2 daughters. When he walked in, I thought, oh, he was white, tall, had glasses. He told me a little about himself and mentioned he had twins. You is destined. Throughout the years, we cultivated a great relationship. I never felt rushed. He always answered all of my questions, and most of the time, he would draw pictures to help me better understand. He asked questions about me because he wanted to know me as a person to be sure to provide the best care possible. I think about finding out I was carrying twins and the bias conversation and thought there was nothing random about being paired with Dr. Williams. It was destiny. When I was younger, I remember being told that my maternal grandmother, Ernestine, was the youngest of 21 kids. I know what you're thinking. Her mother, Minnie, died when she was only 15 months, so my grandmother was raised by one of her older sisters. My grandmother had 8 children, but they were all singletons. Growing up, I remember hearing that my maternal grandparents, Minnie and Will, had 21 kids, and 6 of those were gifted to them in the form of 3 sets of fraternal twins. So, on March 18th, 2019, after the shock of all shocks wore off, I thought about my great-grandmother Minnie and simply said, thanks, Grandma. Although she was born in 1889 and died in 1934, well before I was even thought about. In that moment, I felt connected to her. Today, I'm privileged enough to guide 2 little girls through life, and I think about my great-grandmother's journey and how different it was for her, but also very thankful that she gave me the juice, and I felt even more connected to her through pure destiny. When I first started this episode, I thought I was going in a certain direction, but I ended up in a totally different destination. There's no coincidence in that because I am old, I am Black, and most importantly, I am destined. Thank you for listening and sharing this space with me. If you connected with anything I said, please be sure to comment, review, and tell a friend. And remember, stay truthful.
Bye-bye. Meow. Bye-bye.